your host, Sandra Boyce, and with me in studio today is an educator, a photographer, a traveler, a Frenchman. Join me in welcoming Mr. Vasco Toppin. Welcome, Mr. Toppin.
Thank you, Sandra, for having me.
Now, we have so much to talk about today, and we are going to get started. We're going to jump straight in. Now, I've said at the beginning that you are an educator, you are a photographer, a traveler, a Frenchman, and we want to find out a little bit about each of those things. So let's go right back to the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about your primary education, your secondary education, and where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? What was life like for you when you were a little boy growing up in Barbados?
Well, I was born in the country in a place called Bosco Bell. And from Bosco Bell, we went on to Spikestown and then to Maynards. And from there, where I'm living now in Ashton Hall.
So you're a St. Peter man through and through.
True and true. Now, however, from the time I was little, I always had a knack for technology. Any toy my parent bought for me, I would pick it down to see how it worked. And I guess that stood me in good stead. Now, primary schools, I went to Bosco Bell Boys School first. Then when I moved to Spikestown. I went to Spikestown Boys School. And from there, Spikestown Boys School, I went to Modern High School from 1960 to 68.
Okay, so you moved through primary, secondary, and let's talk a little bit about your first work experience.
Oh, now when I wanted to be a policeman.
Like most of the boys your age probably
Exactly.
at that time.
Because my uncle was a policeman, and I asked him and he never answered me. So I was home for quite a while, not doing anything, until a good friend of mine saw me and said, Vasco, what are you doing? He said, I have a position for you at I said, I don't want to teach, I want to be a policeman. So he said, come with me. And I went. I went to the Paragon High School. It was in the vicinity of where the Nation Publishing Company is now.
Okay.
And I fell in love with teaching because the children were so receptive. They were well-mannered and willing to learn.
Was this a primary school or
No,
secondary?
that was a secondary
school. So you started in secondary school.
Yes.
So you started at Paragon, and where did you move from there?
From Paragon, a friend of mine suggested that I work in the government. So I had a stint at All Saints Boys School.
Back in the parish of St. Peter?
Back in the parish of St. Peter, and worked there for about 28 years.
Wow. Okay.
But while at All Saints Boys School, I noticed at the time it was audiovisual aids department. They would bring a lot of equipment to the school. And I just fell in love with this equipment. The projectors, movie projectors, the film strip projectors and things like that. So much so that in 1970, a Peace Corps teacher came to the school and he set up a scout group. So we decided to raise some funds for the scouts to take them to Jamboree in 1972. So I would borrow a projector, a movie projector from AVA, and rent a tape from the Bridgetown Plaza, a Western.
Okay.
And that is...
These are places that we're not very familiar with now.
Exactly. And I remember my first toy with the movie projector and this Western. At one point, the tape was bad, and I had to put my finger on a button to keep it running.
The whole time?
The whole time, and by the time I finished, my thumb was cooked. But then I did something that brought the crowd, because at one point the crowd wanted their monies back. There was a fight between two cowboys, and the two of them fell through a window, and I did a reverse, and I brought them back, and then threw them back out again, and the crowd went wild.
And there began your love for technology. So let's talk a little bit about the early days of the audiovisual aids department, because you would have moved from teaching eventually into the same department that you were now getting resources from. So how did that transition happen for you?
Well, again, I always wanted to work there too, but I never saw the opportunity. It never arose until Arlette, one of our colleagues, she went to Canada for a 3-month stint, and they called me, and I was elated. I said, "What?
A
This
dream
is
come
it."
true.
Dream came true. And what I did from the time I got there, I got interested in every piece of equipment that the audiovisual aids had, so that in a few months' time, I was competent in the use of a lot of this equipment.
Did you miss the classroom at any time?
Not at all. Not at all. I was in my
You were in your
realm,
element, your realm.
my element.
Doing what you love to do.
Exactly.
So what are some of the things that you would have done working in the then called the audiovisual aids
Well, one of
department?
the things that we did, we started the lab, the computer lab. So I was in charge of the computer lab at a point where I trained teachers in the use of computers, using the computers.
And this would have been around what year? Or so?
79,
79.
I
Wow.
think it was.
Okay. So we're talking
Just a
way
little.
even before we actually had the EduTech program going. And all of
Yes,
this.
it was before that, long before that. And I used to enjoy that. Now, these classes would be from 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock. Come 3 o'clock, many of them still inside there. 6 o'clock, they're still
They
there.
don't want to leave.
But we are to leave at 3 o'clock. But Mr. Toppin, what we want to do, we want to finish our work so that tomorrow when you bring something new, we will catch up. So many nights I spent till like 7 o'clock, 7:30 with those. So I enjoy that because I was doing something and they were interested in what I was doing. So that made my work so easy.
So let's talk about the kinds of computers that you used back then. I imagine they must have been pretty large computers in comparison to what we have now.
Big, cumbersome things. This thing on the desktop, the tower, we called it,
Yes.
and the keyboard. It was
It
cumbersome.
was cumbersome.
Nothing like what you have now.
You've come a long way.
We have.
So you worked with the computers, and then how many years did you eventually spend working in the audiovisual aids
I think I
department?
spent about 12 years up there, you know. Yeah.
Okay. And what other areas did you work while you were there, other than the computer lab?
Well, training photography, still photography, because I didn't like the video. So I trained quite a number of teachers in still photography. And we went all over the place into the park and took pictures. Then we came back and we look at them, we assessed them to show them where they could have done better. You know.
So how I'm assuming that we would have had a dark room.
Oh yes.
At the media resource.
Oh yes.
The audiovisual aids.
Yes.
Which is non-media resource department.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that process. Taking the teachers, what did you do? You trained them how to use the photography, how to use the equipment, how to develop the film.
Exactly.
Just walk us through that process of what would happen in your training classes then.
Well, in the training classes, when they came back in, they would have to get the film. They would have to go in the dark room, spool it onto a ratchet, put it in a light tight box, and you would pour the chemicals. The developer, then you had to wash that off, and you put in something called a fixer.
What a process.
And when you finish with the fixer, then the film is ready. You rinse the film and put it to dry.
Wow.
And then you had the printer where you pass the film through it and you do your printing.
So how long, how long could that process take in terms of from beginning to
printing?
Could
have taken about, depends on how good the person was. Could be an hour or a little more than an hour.
So we can definitely see that there was a passion for what they were doing.
Oh yes.
To go through that hour-long process to see what pictures had been taken.
Exactly.
So how did you get involved in photography? I mean, was it only at the audiovisual aids, or was there a love for that before you went there?
The same 1970, when that Peace Corps teacher came to Barbados, he taught mathematics. And along with the scout troop, he was a photographer. So he got me into photography. He had a dark room. Okay. So that is where he got my training.
So
Yeah.
he would have started
He
that.
would have started that, yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, about the Peace Corps, the training that you would have received. So he would have trained you in the use of the cameras, how to develop the film,
Yes.
and where would that have taken you in terms of what you were doing on your own now with your own photography?
Well, as a result of that, I became a wedding photographer.
Oh wow!
And I did myriad weddings in this country.
Mhm.
Even I have some friends in Germany.
Mhm.
And at one point, my friend, he got married, and I went to Germany and did his wedding.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So I love that started in the classroom has spread out.
spread out.
So let's talk about your traveling, because you're talking about going to Germany, and we're not going to get to the French part just yet, but let's talk a little bit about your travels, how your photography has taken you across the globe.
Well, I wouldn't say the photography took me as such. What happened is that I was a member of an association here called Alliance Française. And one year they told me that I could go to Paris to teach English. I said, yes,
Wow.
I want to do that. So I went to Paris. I taught English, and I met my German friend. He taught German. Right? So that is how it started. So one vacation, he invited me to his home. That time he was still at his parents. And I went to Germany for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And I really enjoyed it.
Now let's go back a little bit. Now, how did you get connected with Alliance Française?
Well, at secondary school, my love for French. I just loved the French language. No matter what I did, I always got a good mark. So I said I could as well continue. And they had classes in conversation. So I would go to these conversation classes, and that helped me a great deal.
And that's how you started with your French. So I understand that you speak French fluently.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to say something for us in French to prove that you can speak French fluently. So do say something for our audience that they can hear the Frenchman.
OK, bonjour Sandra. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec toi. C'est bien longtemps que je ne suis pas venu ici. Maintenant, c'est Media Resource Department, mais j'aimais tellement Media Resource Department.
Okay. Now you're going to tell us what you said in English.
I said, Sandra, it is a pleasure being here with you. It's been a long time since I've come to this place, my workplace, and I totally enjoyed working with the Media Resource Department.
Awesome. So you've been at Alliance Française. Your love for French has taken you there, and you have this desire to continue with your French, and then you have an opportunity to spend a year in Paris. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have been crazy at that opportunity and grabbed it as you did to be able to spend a year in Paris. So tell us a little bit about that experience, what it was like, how you managed, the things that you enjoyed doing while there. That must have been quite an experience.
It was. The school I taught at, they gave me a room. I had a room. My German friend, he had a room too. So on the weekends, we descended on Paris.
Wow.
We took over Paris. We went all through Paris. But the sightseeing, the photography now, I took myriad photos, so many photos of Paris. And I still have very good souvenirs, memories of that experience.
What would you say was your most memorable experience from living in Paris?
My most memorable was there's a church on a hill. It's a cathedral called Montmartre. On evenings, thousands of people sat on the steps of this cathedral. This cathedral overlooks Paris. And you can see all the lights in Paris. It is a beautiful thing to see. That is one of the things that really took my breath away the first time I saw it. And I went there a couple of times after.
Right, okay.
Another thing too is that in Paris, at the school where I work, we had a canteen. And the lunch was just a minimal few francs, not very expensive, but they were 3-course meals
Wow.
with wine
For lunch
for lunch.
at a school.
Yes, at a school. Yeah, yeah.
Wine on the job.
Wine, yeah. So I really enjoy that aspect. The French cuisine, that's it. The French cuisine is extra.
Sound like a true Frenchman.
Mm.
So let's talk about some other differences. You talk about the cuisine. So you're at a school, you're teaching, but you're having 3-course meals. You're having this experience, which is different from teaching here in Barbados. So can you tell us a little bit more about the differences between teaching in Barbados and teaching in Paris? Because you did say you taught students how to speak English.
Yes.
Right. So could you give us a little insight as to the differences between the two?
Well, the first culture shock I got was that in Paris, they don't call you any Mr. anything. They call me Vasco.
The students?
The students.
Okay.
So there's no Mr. So you get to bond with those students.
So what other differences did you experience in the classroom? You said, okay, so we're talking about the cuisine, we're talking about the relationship between student and teachers, the approach, which is quite different. And anything else that you can share about that time?
Well, the children were, I would say, they were kind. They were all right. I didn't even get a hint of racism because, Paris is a metropolitan area. So we had white people from all over the world. Africans, a lot of Africans were there too. So that too was another experience to having to teach all of these different cultures. And what I did, I took down some Bob Marley records and I showed them how to dance to reggae and all of that. And they thoroughly enjoy that. They really enjoy that.
Bob Marley is a hit wherever you go.
Wherever.
Wherever you go. Okay, so then you left, you spent a year in Paris and you came back to Barbados. This was during your time here at the Audiovisual Aids department that you were in Paris? No, it was after?
This was before.
Before?
This was before.
Okay, so you come back from Paris and you're back into the classroom. Was that a culture shock when you came back as well?
Found it very difficult to operate
To
in the
readjust.
class, to readjust. Yes, it was. Because, you having children who call you Vasco and now it's Mr. Toppin, and it was difficult.
Yeah.
But I soon got back into it.
Okay, so what subjects did you teach here in Barbados? I know you taught English in Paris. What did you teach here?
Primary school.
Primary school. So everything.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you involved in any clubs, creating any clubs in your schools as well?
Well, as I
you were at? The photography for sure.
You mean here in Barbados?
Here in Barbados.
Well, as I said, the scouting.
Okay.
Yeah, that was mainly scouting and 4-H. Yeah, that was something to enjoy, to the 4-H, because there was a farm in Mainers. They gave us a plot of land. So we got together, the teachers and a chap called Hainsley Ben, very well known in Barbados.
Yes, very well known.
Agriculturalist. So he helped us a great deal in planting and reaping the crops that we sowed.
Sounds interesting. So let's talk a little bit about EduTech, because I know that you played a crucial role in the EduTech 2000 initiative. By this time, you were in the Audiovisual Aids department?
Yes.
Right. So let's talk about your role in EduTech and what you did in that program.
Well, I was teacher training was my thing, to get the what we call it change management, because I had to convince teachers that this was better for them. That if they have their things, for example, I showed them how to use PowerPoint.
Right.
They could put their lessons in PowerPoint and present it to the children, and they could do it in such a way that they don't have to say a word. The children will just read the instructions and carry it out.
So you were at the forefront of the EduTech 2000 initiative, working with teachers, trying to get them to infuse technology. What do you think about their response? What was their response like back then for teachers?
The response was tremendous in some cases, but in my opinion, not enough. And I am constantly saying that if all teachers had embraced the technology, we would be in a better position now with it. For example, I no longer get in the line to pay my bills. All of my bills, I pay them online. If I need to do any transactions with a company, and once they have the platform,
Facility.
I'm ready to go. And we are finding now that a lot of Barbadians, for example, the government doesn't want to send you checks. They want to send your salary, or if you do work for them, directly to your account. And I have all of that set up for myself.
Because you've always been into technology.
Into it.
Yeah, and it's a challenge to get persons to change from what they are comfortable with, introducing something new. But the EduTech program, of course, was a move towards getting us ready for look at where we are now. When COVID came, we had no choice but to move and infuse the technology in the classrooms. And like you're saying, we had an opportunity back then to start that process. And what do you think when you compare that process that was started then with what's happening in the classrooms now in terms of teacher involvement? How have you seen that grown over those years?
It has grown somewhat, but as I said before, I don't think enough. Because I think that the technology, some teachers are very daunted when it comes to the technology. And they tell, I remember some time ago, teachers would tell me, oh, I've been teaching for 20 years of success without the technology, so I can continue in that vein. And although you show them how easy it can be, some of them are not, to my mind, not interested.
Yeah, and I suppose we have that challenge where we do find persons who have a struggle with changing. But again, as your role in the audiovisual is then media resource department. Now, as you would know, the onus is on us to keep reaching out, to keep working with persons. So what are you doing now? You are retired. How long have you been retired now?
14 years.
14 years
14
into retirement.
glorious years.
14 glorious years, he says, into retirement. And what are you doing, or what have you been doing over those 14 glorious years since you've retired?
Well, I've done quite a lot of traveling. I've seen practically all the islands now in the Caribbean. And
of course, you've photographed them all.
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Have thousands, I don't know, countless photos. And the thing is that I'm now sharing them. I've been giving them to schools, like places of interest. I'm sharing them with schools.
Awesome.
Schools that show an interest. Because when I was in the AVA, if I go to a school and I saw a teacher, she had charts in her classroom, I would say to her, oh, you see that? I have one that can complement that. I would get in my car, go back down to AVA and bring it back for her.
So what else have you been up to since you're traveling, you're doing your photography, anything else?
Taking care of my grandchildren.
Taking care of your grandchildren.
That is another job.
A job in itself.
A job. Yes, it is.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 3 grandchildren. 2 boys and a girl, a boy 15, and another boy 8, and a girl 10. The boy 15, he's at St. Michael's School, and the other 2 are at All Saints.
Primary school.
Primary school,
okay.
Yes.
So you've taken up granddad duties now.
Yes.
But you haven't given up your photography. You haven't given up your French. Are you still into the French?
Oh, yes.
And how do you keep your French so crisp, and how do you keep your connection with your French?
Well, from 2004, because I also had a stint in what we used to call school supervision and management. And in 2000, this lady from Martinique visited the department because she wanted to bring students to Barbados to camp.
Okay.
So I heard of French, and someone said, look, there's a Mr. Toppin here who speaks French. So they sent the lady to me, and she put the thing to me. She wanted a school where she could bring so from 2000 up to 2023, I was organizing every year for their coming to Barbados, making sure I get the school ready and have everything in place for them by the time they get here, go to the airport, pick them up and bring. So that is how I keep my French fluent.
Nice.
And
So what do they do once they're here for that? And
okay,
how long do they spend here?
they spend about 3 weeks. Normally there would be 2 groups. One would come in late July, and then the other come in early August. Excursions, picnics, and they love the beaches in Barbados. So that was a hit with them, you know. And, you know, sometimes I would teach them English. Depends on if they were interested.
Right. So they spend the time in the schools,
In
with
the
the students
schools.
interacting.
Yes.
Right. So you have the students hearing them speak French, and then they have the students hear the students speaking the English as well.
Right.
And that keeps your French
Going.
constant and going.
Yes.
Sounds awesome. So let's look a little bit at your whole photography. I want to go back to the photography, because you said to me that you have been taking thousands, millions of lots of photos. What do you do with your photographs even now? And if we wanted to be able to access those photographs, see them, is there somewhere that we can go to see them? Let's say perhaps that teachers may be doing something about Caribbean islands, and then we want to get a few photographs of the Caribbean islands and what's happening there. How can we get access to that?
Well, I have most of them on a hard drive, an external hard drive. And when I was at AVA, I had shared some already. So I'm willing to share more with you. But like the wedding and things, I'm finished with that.
Oh, no more wedding photography?
No more wedding, no. If I travel, then I take photographs. Or like today when I look across Bridgetown from the Media Resource Department, it seems so beautiful. So I took quite a lot of pictures. And I'm on WhatsApp. I put them a lot of photos on my status.
Right.
So that friends could see them.
So you're still very much into the photography.
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any parting words that you would want to give to our teachers, those persons? We are now moving, we are still trying to move through the education process. We are still trying to infuse technology in the classrooms. Are there any words that you would want, words of advice you want to share with teachers as it relates to the infusion of technology in the classroom?
I would say to all teachers, get interested in technology. It can help you a great deal. When I first got in contact with it, when I got my first computer, at the end of the term, I would total my marks, total my register, and finish first. Then I would go around to all the other classes and assist the teachers with it. So technology is a great thing. And I would advise any teacher who is worth his or her salt to get involved with the technology. It makes work easier.
Well, I couldn't have said it any clearer than that. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Toppin, sharing your story with us. We want to wish you a continued happy retirement, doing all the things that you love to do. And we know that you will be given of your services if needed in any area in terms of your French, your photography, your technology assistance. We know that we can call on you at any time. And so we want to thank you for coming today and sharing with us on MRD Chatroom. We are going to close off here for today. Thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you next time on MRD Chat.